Hi, I'm Lauren Payne from the Malone Center for Career Engagement. I want to give just a few minutes because I can see the participants are kind of trickling in. So give us just a minute and we'll get started in just a few minutes. All right, it looks like most of our participants have joined us at this point. So let's go ahead and get started. Good evening, my name is Lauren Payne and I'm the director in the Malone Center for Career Engagement. And we are really excited to have you all with us tonight and to have some of our outstanding alumni from the classes of 2009 and 2010 with us tonight to share a little bit about their personal experience with graduating into a recession and hopefully offer some advice to some of you that maybe have recently graduated or are going to be graduating in the next class. So we're super excited to have you all with us tonight. Before we get started, we just wanted to take a few minutes to see who's with us tonight, to see who's in our audience. So let's go to the poll, and if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and just take a minute and tell us who you are. Okay, I see some votes coming in. Maybe a few more seconds. All right, so here are our results. So it looks like a lot of you are joining us from the class of 2020. So congratulations on your recent graduation. We've got a couple of ambitious current Furman students. So thanks for joining us, and a couple of alumni. So welcome to you all. We can kind of see a breakdown of our majors, several from the arts and humanities, a few from business, science, and some of our interdisciplinary students. And looks like the bulk of you are looking for employment opportunities. Great, thanks for sharing. That'll help us out tonight. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and I want to introduce you to our moderator this evening. Lindy Bryant is a 2009 graduate. She was a political science major here at Furman, and she currently serves as a commercial litigation attorney with Adams and Reese. So we are excited to have Lindy with us tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lindy.
Thanks, Lauren. Hi, this is Lindy Bryant. It's great to be with all of you tonight. Congratulations to all of you joining us who just graduated. I know this is an unusual time and it doesn't quite feel like you just graduated, but proud of your accomplishments, and certainly everyone on this panel knows how you feel right now having graduated from Furman. So congratulations, and we're happy that you're joining us this evening. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our three panelists. Two of them are from my graduating class of 2009. First is Courtney Crandall. She graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Music and Accounting. She currently lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and works as Director of Talent Acquisition for J-Curve. Second is Chris Becker, also class of 2009, lives in New York City, but is currently residing, I guess, or temporarily living in Savannah. He works as Vice President of Acquisition and Sponsor Finance for Mitsubishi UFJ Financial Group, and his Furman degree is in Business Administration. Finally, last but certainly not least, our third panelist is Drew Sisk, a graduate of the class of 2010. He graduated with a double major in studio art and Asian studies and currently lives in the Chapel Hill, Durham, North Carolina area. He works as a book designer for Duke University Press. Courtney, Chris, and Drew, it's great to see you guys. Thank you so much for the panel.
Happy to be here.
I'm going to start off with a softball question just so our participants can get to know you a little bit better. What is your favorite Furman memory? And Courtney, I'll start with you.
Sure. I mean, obviously a lot of Furman memories, but I think the one that sticks out the most for me is when we went fountain hopping. I'm not sure if everybody still does that freshman year, but I remember as a senior thinking it was really dirty, but how much fun we all had. And we went with, I had a sister hall and I mean, I had a brother hall, but I also had a sister hall. We all went together and some people threw each other in the fountain. And to me, it was just a really great opportunity to get to know everybody at the beginning of freshman year. I felt like that really kicked off the beginning of my Furman experience with a good laugh. So it's just always really stood out to me as one of my favorite parts of being at Furman.
I love that. I hope they still do that. I would be
Me too.
Tradition isn't there. Drew, how about you?
Yeah, so I think my favorite memory, again, lots of awesome things come to mind when I think about my time at Furman, but just thinking about like the week before our senior art exhibition and just installing our work and seeing everybody, all my classmates' work come together for like that big final exhibition, and like all that time we had spent in the art building at Furman and all the bonding that we had kind of like come to fruition in that amazing body of work that everybody made for the senior exhibition.
That's awesome. Chris, what's your favorite Furman memory?
Yeah, thanks, Lindy. And unfortunately, mine's a little bittersweet today with some of the news and everything. My junior and senior year at Furman, I was actually the public address announcer for the baseball team. And so I got to spend a lot of time around the baseball team and on the field with those guys and in the press box. And so it's actually one of my favorite memories. And I actually called a game for the Greenville Drive later in life as a result of having that experience. So it was a lot of fun.
That's great. I'm glad you shared that. I'd like to think baseball will come back. So obviously, the majority of participants with us are recent graduates of Furman, and certainly all of us were seniors at Furman at one point in time. Feels a little bit like a lifetime ago. Chris, Courtney, and I, we just celebrated our 10-year reunion this past fall. But I want to ask, what was your experience like as a senior at Furman during the height of, the mortgage crisis or the recession, that we all experienced? And Drew, I'll start with you.
Okay, yeah. So for me, I would say I was on kind of like the tail end of the height of the recession, finishing in 2010, but definitely going into senior year, there was just, so much uncertainty, like what are things going to look like by the time we finish? We had just seen your guys' class kind of go out into the world, and we're just like really kind of nervous and anxious in a way that I think we can relate a little bit to this year's group, maybe not quite as abrupt a change. But yeah, just tons of uncertainty. I knew that I wanted to pursue graphic design, so go straight into the profession right away. So yeah, I knew kind of going into that last year as a senior that I was going to have to like try to, I guess, make as many connections and try to, try to have as much stuff bubbling as I could by the time I got out. So that's kind of what I guess my feelings were during that year. And yeah, just tons of uncertainty that is there anyway as a senior, and it's like throwing that on top of it is just yeah, difficult times.
Chris, how about you? How was your experience as a senior during the height of the recession?
Yeah, thanks, Lindy. And obviously, I think, most people will say the recession peaked kind of the fall of our senior year for yourself, Courtney, and I. And so I remember, and I tell the story a lot, sitting in a panel at Furman the Wednesday after Lehman Brothers failed. And it was a finance panel. So very interesting times, to say the least, for someone that went down that path professionally. I like to think that it influenced me even further to say this is where I wanted to be professionally. But certainly, from a career standpoint, I went from okay, there's some hope and optimism going into the summer of '08, right? And then fall of '08 with the market kind of falling apart, Lehman falling apart, AIG needing a bailout, to no job prospects. And so for me, it was kind of not having a traditional background of, interviewing at boutiques or working in investment banking in New York prior to that. It was a tough road that I had to work through. What I will say is it kind of taught me some resiliency out of the whole thing. And I think it's made me a better professional in the long run to have that experience. So especially now that we're living through another crisis, from my personal experience, I can actually say, I went to work and got a job during that time and saw how people behaved and reacted. So it's made me more credible in my field as a result of having that personal experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Courtney, you also had a degree in accounting, so that business experience, certainly you were, in the business department as a senior. How was your senior year during the recession?
So I had a bit of a unique experience, but more similar to Chris. I had lined up a few interviews with accounting firms because I chose to take the public accounting route. And I had done a summer leadership program in the summer of '08. And so I was slated to interview with a few firms in the fall, and they had made decisions by like October. So it was really kind of decided, and I had a summer internship for summer of 2009 already lined up before the crisis hit really big. So fortunately or unfortunately, I was kind of blissfully unaware of the effects it was going to have on me as a senior in 2009. But as the year progressed, I had a lot of friends in the music department that were planning to go to graduate school, and because there was so much competition, because there were so many fewer jobs out in the market for music majors, more people were going to graduate school, and a lot of my friends in the music department had a lot of competition to get into graduate school, and some of them, even though they were great and had good, a good trajectory and good grades and good auditions, great skills, they just didn't get in because there was too much competition. And a lot of them struggled the year after trying to find any kind of job, while they were waiting to get into graduate school. And fortunately, a few years later, that picked up and they were able to make other plans and get into graduate school. But when it did hit for me was the following year, because in the fall of 2009, whereas I would have had a job offer on the table after my internship, they postponed making offers for the winter and the summer interns in 2009. And I went into graduate school not having an answer as to whether or not I'd get an internship. And there were 5 summer interns and 2 winter interns. Usually they would have made offers to all 7 of us, and they only made offers to 3. And in between the time of my summer internship and the fall offer being made, the KPMG ended up laying off some people, and no promotions and no raises were made in the fall, which happens every single year at a Big 4 firm. So that was unforeseen to a lot of people. So during my internship, I knew people were getting laid off, and I'm thinking, how on earth am I going to get an offer when people are being laid off at the same company? So it was an interesting time. They decided, to move forward with, because they needed fresh meat for our year. So I got really lucky, and I'm really thankful for that opportunity. And when I was going through the interview process, they joke, death and taxes are always what, everybody needs that. So I really got lucky. But it ended up working out, but sometimes I wonder how.
Yeah, honestly, I had a similar experience. I went to law school after we graduated, but finding a job, summer after my first year of law school was next to impossible, because all the people ahead of me in law school were kind of taking the low-hanging fruit jobs that a first-year law student would have had. So I had that exact same experience of, even if you're in a protected, grad school program after graduation during a recession, it doesn't make it any easier. So
Right.
Those of you on the call who may have had jobs fall through, or internships, or even graduate school plans, no one has it any easier than anyone else. So I think, thank you for raising that point, Courtney.
The thing that I did hear, so I didn't mean to interrupt, is keep pressing. So for those of you that, if you're in a protected situation or you're not in a protected situation, don't sit and twiddle your thumbs and hope that it gets better. Like, find some way to continue your education or some way to improve your skills. Even if you're at Starbucks and working as a barista, make sure that you're taking an online class or an online, YouTube classes on Excel or something to better your skills, because that makes you more marketable compared to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And that leads us right into our next question, which is, for all of the panelists, what were your plans, for after graduation, and how did those change, if at all, as a result, of the recession we were in when we all graduated? Chris, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Lindy. Yeah, obviously would have loved to start off, at a bulge bracket bank or, something in Wall Street, right? But probably wasn't possible. I actually graduated with no job in sight and made the decision, moved back home from Pennsylvania. So was home for about a month and received an interview request with the Greenville Drive. So my first job out of college was with the Greenville Drive. Worked with them through the end of the season and was laid off 3 months into, my professional career. So certainly have an appreciation for kind of what the job market is like. What I kind of learned out of that experience, which I think is more important than what I did as I progressed to get into banking, was really, how do you keep yourself busy, to Courtney's point, but in a productive way to where you're developing experiences or skill sets that you can lean on as you look for that end goal job. I had a banker once told me, your career is not about where you start, it's about how you run that race and where you get to. And as you kind of look up and look around at your peers that you graduate with, you're going to start to see yourself separate as you benchmark yourself against them. And so what I would say to a lot of people is, be proactive, be out there networking, looking for opportunities that you find interesting and compelling. But importantly, learn how that you can tie those skills or those stories into your message when you ultimately have that chance to get the interview that you've been after for a period of time. If it is banking, what did working for the Greenville Drive teach you? Or what did working for an entrepreneurial startup teach you? How does that translatable to this occupation? Every experience you have is translatable. You just got to find those nuggets and be able to communicate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. Drew, how about you? How were your plans, for graduation changed, if at all?
Yeah. So as I said, I'm a graphic designer. So my goal, coming out was to get something lined up as a, junior graphic designer at a, ad agency or design studio. Didn't have anything lined up right after graduation, but had been kind of, talking to folks at Furman. I had been working in the marketing and public relations office as a student designer. So had kind of been building up a network that way. And I had interned at an agency in Greenville the summer before graduation. So just kind of keeping in contact with those folks, but really I didn't have anything set up immediately. So I kind of set my sights on Atlanta as the kind of biggest market that was close by. So through a lot of the contacts I had made at Furman, I set up a series of I guess you'd call them informational interview type things. In graphic design, it's really common to have portfolio reviews. So get together your portfolio, say, hey, I want to meet with you. I know you guys aren't hiring right now, but will you, check out my work? I'd love to share it with you. So I met tons of people that way and ended up landing another internship post-graduation paid. I'll say that if you take on an internship, especially after you've graduated and you're doing meaningful work, you should be paid for it, as an aside. I think that conversation has moved along. But yeah, so I ended up taking on an internship at a place called the Jones Group in Atlanta and did that for 8 months. It kind of kept me going and then allowed me to kind of, move down to Atlanta and start meeting people that way. And I just went to everything I could. There's in our industry, there's a thing called AIGA. So I made sure to go to all of those events. There's a series called Creative Mornings, just putting myself out there as much as I could, and then ended up getting a full-time position as a junior designer at a place called EM2 in Atlanta, and was there for 5 years ultimately, and worked my way up to associate creative director. So yeah, just like getting out and meeting as many people, and that looks different in every field, but the nice thing in my field is you have something tangible to show people, and you can show them your thinking, kind of like show off some of those skills that we got at Furman. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Courtney, I know we kind of talked about how your plans, adapted after graduation. Is there anything else you want to add, or we can roll right in?
Not really, no. Mine was pretty much stuck with the same plan. There's a moment of uncertainty for a few months, but I ended up starting with KPMG after I graduated as planned, so.
Yeah. Well, one thing I meant to say at the beginning of our discussion, for those of you participating, we'd love to answer any questions that you have, and we'll save time at the end of our discussion to answer questions. So if you'll use, I think it's the Q&A feature or the chat, I don't remember. One of those two, we'll figure it out. So yeah, if you have any questions, we'll certainly save time at the end to answer those. So please feel free to type those into the box and we'll answer them at the end. Navigating the career world, professional world for a job is challenging no matter whether there's a recession or not. It feels like you're constantly writing cover letters and sending resumes and calling people and interviewing and yada, yada, yada. With your experiences going through that process during the recession, do you have any suggestions for the graduating class who may be going through that process right now and feeling like it's even more challenging because of the limitations on face-to-face interactions, or maybe because of the competition that's out there? Courtney, I'll start with you. Any interviewing or networking job search tips that you might be able to offer?
Well, when I was at Furman, I felt like I was the only person that used the Career Center. And I found that was incredibly helpful. I met with, his name is Larry, and I cannot remember his last name. He might be retired from Furman now, but he helped me navigate changing my resume. We put my resume online, which I don't know if people still do that or if that's unheard of anymore, but I had like my own website basically through Furman's portal that allowed me to put my resume there so I could attach it, attach the link and my actual resume. And even now, being in the recruiting sector of the world, I think people need to remember that your resume is selling yourself. So if you're never going to sell yourself in any other situation, you need to be doing it in a resume and during an interview. And you need to be convincing that person why they need to hire you and why you're the best person for the job. And even if you don't check every single box that they're looking for, if you check, 75%, and don't hold me to that percentage, but a good number of the boxes, apply for the job and put yourself out there. The worst case scenario is you go through an interview and it's an experience and you don't get the job, or you go through the interview and realize it's not something you want, but at least you've been through the process and have the opportunity and possibly the offer in hand so you can make that decision. So I would also say keeping up your LinkedIn. When I was in college, I kind of thought LinkedIn was silly, but in the professional world, we use it very heavily. And I spend at least 50% of my time looking at people's profiles on LinkedIn. So anybody looking for help there, I'm happy to offer assistance and chat through that. But I think, listing your actual experiences that you've done. And I had a lot of bosses that helped me write those bullet points early on in my job. So, my internships, the whole point of an internship when you're in school and right after school and in grad school is to learn how to sell yourself and be a professional in the working world. So don't be afraid to ask for help, ask for questions, that you have during your internship. They're there to help you, not just pay you to be there and do good work. So a lot of them also helped review my resume. What I would ask, what are you used to seeing when you're when you're looking at people to hire, and what do you think about my format? And my resume went through, I don't know how many different format iterations until I finally landed one that I liked and I could keep it all on one page. And so I think just kind of thinking and rethinking how you're presenting yourself, maybe a certain resume format or a certain, cover letter description is getting you more interviews than another. So just kind of keep tabs on that, and just sell yourself, and, be confident, and, knowing you're missing the skills, and don't be overconfident, but definitely be confident in what you do know, and why you'd be a good employee for that company.
Yeah, those are great tips. Drew, how about you? Any suggestions?
Yeah, so I think this is kind of related to my last answer. Like, if there are, people in your field that you're really interested in meeting and talking to, again, even if there's not like an actual job on the line, just reaching out to them, and then thinking about, like, if you're going to talk to them right now, it's probably going to be on this platform, on Zoom. Like, how do you think about how to use that platform to your advantage? Like, how do you construct your setting? What does that say about you? Like, my industry is very like visuals driven. So it's like, yeah, how can you set up your environment to communicate what you want to say about yourself? But yeah, just like trying to get in touch with as many people as you can. And as Courtney was saying, people that you've interned with, just getting as much advice from them and staying in contact with them, I think is definitely really helpful. But yeah, and in my field in graphic design as well, like maintaining a website with your work, I think that probably goes for other fields as well, like kind of a portfolio of your work, and making that really, really easy and pared down and simple for people to look at if they don't have a whole lot of time. Which is similar to how your resume should be. But yeah, I think you kind of have like a, people are, people I know in my field are sitting at home working in front of their screens, and lots of people are taking on these like kind of conversations with recent grads to do, reviews of their work. So yeah, just don't be afraid to reach out to people.
Yeah, thank you. Chris, what advice do you have for those who are navigating the job search process right now?
Yeah, I'll start, and I kind of tied into it a little bit, and then I'm actually going to jump real quick and answer something that ties into one of the questions that came in via chat about balancing reaching out to potential employers, because I think they kind of come together here at this point. And so what I would say is, like, the most important thing you can do at this stage as you reach out is be proactive. Develop a story to both what Drew and Courtney said that is unique to you. You're probably going to talk to, 50, 70 people. In my experience, I talked to probably 77 investment banking or banking professionals in Atlanta before I got one person to offer me a job. What's key about that is having a message within that story that that resonates with people, and people will understand, and they'll grasp on the one thing. Oh, Chris is really interested in entrepreneurship, or he was a broadcaster for the baseball team. That's really cool. Like, these little nuggets, you may think of them as, demeaning or non-professional now, but as you take them and craft your story around what your experience has been, everybody's going to hear something different. And so crafting that story is essential. Regarding kind of the question that came in, and I'm jumping screens real quick, from Morgan Cooper on kind of reaching out, and Courtney's probably the expert on this, but what I would say as somebody that does hire is, I'm going to hire the person that's in constant communication with me and constantly reaching out to me and showing interest in the position. Even if there is a firm-wide hiring freeze, or there's macro challenges that are facing the sector and we're not going to be able to hire anytime soon, the person that shows genuine interest in me, brings good ideas, and has the willingness and the effort behind their outreach, I'm going to try and find a way to help that person or bring that person on board. And so what I would say is, don't limit your outreach just because of the environment that we're in right now. In fact, do more of it. So that's kind of what I'll leave there, of kind of what I think is successful in this kind of environment.
To piggyback on that, I was going to say, make it personal. So we have LinkedIn, we have social media. If you have someone that you admire and that's kind of what you want, and you want to make a connection with them, don't just make it about the job. Say, oh, I see.
Uh-oh, did we lose Courtney?
think she's going in and out.
Uh-oh.
Okay, Drew, I'll let you jump.
I can tag on to
Join
what
us.
Courtney was saying. Yeah, like tailoring those communications to, like, you know, I see that you know, your company is really invested in, you know, XYZ. Well, you know, this is what I think, you know, I can bring to the table in that sense. Or like, even if it's, you know, like Morgan over here is asking about like pressing for jobs. I think people are going to be expecting, most employers are expecting people to reach out even when there's not a job advertised or listed. So I don't think, at least in my context, that's not unusual.
Yeah.
But yeah, to just do like a little bit of research and you know, like I'm in academic publishing right now. So it's like, what are you interested in publishing, and, you know, what specific question do you have for me? And then we can start a conversation, you know, from there. Even though, you know, where I'm working right now, there's a hiring freeze. It doesn't matter. We can still start conversations now.
Yeah, I agree. To Morgan's point, I think Chris and Drew both said this. The key is to be genuine and sincere. I think as long as your communications with a potential employer or just people in your network, whether they're hiring or not, or whether they're in a profession that you're interested in, it's absolutely about understanding the industry and what they do, having the right questions to kind of dig into how you might be able to fit in with their company or with, you know, working with that person. And then just making sure your follow-ups are sincere. And I think that for the most part comes through, and any employer, whether they're really busy right now or dead slow and in a hiring freeze, are going to respond and say, look, here's what the circumstance is, but I'd love to help you, and you know, reach back out to me, or let me introduce you to X, Y, or Z. I think as long as that communication is coming through and you're genuinely interested and that shines through, I think it's not going to feel like you're overstepping. So I think that's a great question. So, you know, this kind of gets into the difficulties of kind of navigating the job market and applying for jobs. A lot of times, you know, you get rejection letters or people who just aren't hiring, or you just don't hear back at all in response to your inquiry, and you feel like you spend hours and hours and hours perfecting your resume and putting together this cover letter, and then you just don't hear anything. You know, when facing those kind of circumstances, how do you keep your emotional and mental health in check? Do you have suggestions for our current students or recent graduates that they might be able to implement when kind of going through these difficult situations? Chris, how about you?
Yeah, my approach might be a little bit cold. I mean, for context, I'm the oldest of 5, and so, you know, it was very matter of fact in our household, but growing up. But, you know, listen, I was let go from my first job 3 months into working in the, you know, job force after graduating Furman. And so you want to talk about a slap in the face or rejection, you know, off the bat, you know, you start questioning, well, you know, am I ever going to get a job that works or makes sense? And to be candid with you, I mean, it was kind of a blessing in disguise. You know, probably wasn't long for being in, you know, minor league baseball. There's not much of long-term career prospects in there. And, you know, no one wants to work until 11 o'clock at night and then show up the next day to make sales calls at, you know, 8 a.m. So it's tough, but I would say, listen, every experience like that, and, you know, every time somebody says, sorry, you know, you don't have a job, it's an opportunity to learn and develop. You know, the number of jobs that I've applied for in my industry before someone answered the call is probably over 100. And I think those are pretty good numbers, to be honest with you. But I would say, listen, rejection's okay, because, you know, you learn something from every experience. Every interview you take, every informational interview you take, every phone call you have, you're getting better and you're getting sharper. And ultimately, the people that are going to offer you a job is because they believe in what your background is. You know, that's who you want to work for. You don't want to go take a job just because it's putting food on the table, although, you know, some people may. I think ultimately you want to be in a situation that's going to set you up for long-term success. And that's going to come down to having an employer or a manager really buy into your story as a prospective employee. And that's where the job offer is going to come from. So I would say go out there and get rejected, 10 times before you accept the job offer is my kind of stance on the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great advice. Drew, how about you?
Yeah, totally. I think what Chris is saying, I like Chris's language around like your story, like what's your story to tell an employer. And I think it's so true. Yeah. I mean, everything, behind every job that you get, there's like so many rejections, so much rejection. Even like every day at work doing, in a creative field, there are ideas that you put like your heart and soul into that just get rejected, so it's like that kind of sharpens you up. But then, I think just being persistent and keeping in touch with people that you meet along the way, even when they don't have anything for you, like right in that moment. Those like portfolio reviews that I did like right out of school when there wasn't even a job. A year later, one of those folks reached out to me and said, "Hey, like we have a spot open." They were a branding firm and they do a lot of work in higher ed. They had just gotten a huge account with the liberal arts college doing an admissions and branding campaign. They're like, "Hey, we remembered you talking about your liberal arts experience. We're taking on work that's that." It was like, I don't even know if it was because of like my skills or whatever, but it was like my story that I brought to the table is why they called me back up, and that's where I ended up working. So it's like you don't know when when some of that stuff comes back around, but it's like just continuing to really like build up a community of people that and that you admire in your field. It comes back around. It's like this is we don't know how long the COVID-19 is going to last and the repercussions, but people that you meet like right now could come back around in the future, and even further down in your career.
Yeah, thank you for that. Hi, Courtney, welcome back.
I don't know what happened. I sit here every day and do interviews. Today's not my day. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. We were just talking about advice to the recent graduates and current students about, kind of how to manage the emotional or the disappointment that kind of comes from applying for all these jobs, maybe not hearing back or, getting rejected. And, I think, Drew, kind of to your point, you never know where your resume is going to end up. You might submit it to a whole bunch of companies and not hear back, but it may be very well sitting on, the HR person's desk, and you might not hear back from them for 6 months or more, but they're kind of keeping, that in the file. So I certainly don't think just because you don't hear back in the short term, that door or opportunity is closed.
Most job applications, most of the times you'll get ghosted. You won't hear anything. It's like, that's totally, I think, Chris, you talked about that. Like that's probably like 80% of the things I've ever applied for. You don't hear anything. So like, that's not, that doesn't mean anything.
I feel like it's worse to get ghosted than to get rejected, honestly.
Yeah.
You're just sitting there like, what, like, I don't know what to do. Like, at least a rejection's like, okay, they're not hiring, or like, I'm not the right fit, or what, you can kind of close that door and move on. But when you just don't get a response, it almost feels way more aggravating. Courtney, do you have any suggestions for our participants on sort of how to manage that disappointment or anxiety in the job search process? Oh, did she freeze again? I think Courtney might have froze again. Okay, all right. Well, we'll keep going.
Lindy, I would just add on top of that, and I think we will all agree on this statement is, leverage the network you have. And I will say we probably have one of the greatest networks there is. Furman, Furman alumni do not want to see other Furman alumni struggle. And so it kind of ties into another one of the prompts. But I think you guys have a benefit of a very strong alumni network that understands what the degree means and what the work is behind the degree. So leverage that, and that'll be a good way to help kind of augment some of that other, kind of cold calling or outreach.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Do you have a personal experience or story, Chris, having used the Furman Alumni Network or even professors or career services in your career? And,
yeah, sure. And I'll kind of keep it anecdotal and quick, so we maybe get to some of the Q&A. But my first job in banking at Bank of America was due to a Furman alumni who's actually an English major, not even a business major, not even an econ major, an English major. So he got me employed at Bank of America. The funny story about that, and it's kind of come full circle, is I was brought back this fall to speak at the business block, and the speaker before me was a gentleman by the name of Will Powell, who was the alumni that hired me at Bank of America. So it's kind of come full circle, and we're both giving back to Furman from our respective, places in life. But I have countless Furman alumni that have helped me, and Will's just the first one that comes to mind because I wouldn't have my career without him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Courtney, how about you? Do you have an experience using the Furman Network in your profession?
Did you direct that to me or to Drew? Sorry.
I did. Courtney, to you. Yeah.
I switched to my phone because my internet on my computer is not cooperating. I'm trying to remember if I used anybody after or towards the end of my senior year. I know my internship for the summer between sophomore and junior year, I got through a connection from our finance professor at Furman, and he had a friend that I think was also a Furman alum that had an investment company in town, and I did a summer internship with them. And that was actually my first exposure to any sort of business, accounting, investment banking, anything in that kind of world. And I kept in touch with him. He was actually one of the guys that helped me put together my resume and kind of edit it and tailor it for what I would be doing going forward. And I also used one of my accounting professors to help with all of that. So that was, really helpful. But I also went through the alumni directory when I was a junior, and I think reached out to a handful of Furman alums that were in accounting to kind of just connect or either shadow them or get advice on the job search process. And I found that to be really helpful. One thing I was going to mention earlier before I had my technical difficulties was when you do reach out is making it personal. So, find out, if what year they graduated, or if they played a sport and you played a sport, or if they were Greek and you were Greek. And frankly, in the professional world, it doesn't matter if you were a different sorority or fraternity than anybody else. You identify with the fact that you were Greek. So don't pay so much attention to that. Or maybe you both went to Furman and both weren't Greek. That's also something to identify with. So I think it's important to make a personal connection in addition to just a professional one, because people remember you better that way. But yeah, utilize all the resources Furman has with the alumni and the career center, and I think that will definitely help with your process in finding any kind of support that you can.
Yeah, thank you. Drew, I'm going to skip you and jump into some of these questions. Okay, so we've got some great questions here, and I'll read them out loud. The first one is, would any of the panelists advise recent graduates to go to graduate school? I guess as opposed to kind of navigating the job market. Does anyone, Courtney, I know having gone to grad school, you may have thoughts on this, but certainly anyone can answer. So Courtney, I'll start with you.
I would say if you were considering going to graduate school and we're on the fence, yes. If you think that pursuing a graduate degree would help you in your career long term, then yes. If it's just something to do, then no. I think a lot of people get extra degrees or do things, and I mean, graduate school is not cheap. So if you're not going to make that up somehow, or you don't have a scholarship to cover that, I don't think that it's worthwhile just to do something. I think it's important to further your career if it will benefit you, or if you have the money and you're just interested, then that's also an option and a great position to be in. But I definitely wouldn't do it just to say you've been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Chris or Drew, do y'all have any thoughts on this question?
I do, specifically in kind of the arts realm. So I I worked in Atlanta for, I guess it was 6 years, and then I went back to school to get my Master of Fine Art. And I think in that field, in fine arts, having like a little bit of experience under your belt after, after undergrad was like really, really helpful for me. I don't think I would have gotten as much out of that experience if I had gone straight through to grad school. I mean, that's just my personal experience. The other thing to keep in mind too, as well, about grad school is, depending on what field you're in, what programs you're looking in, there's really great funding for it too. So it's like, if you're kind of sitting in this kind of gap time and things aren't working out, maybe it is the time to do that right away. So I think that's like, it's really specific to you as an individual in my field, which is more of kind of like the arts and creative fields.
Yeah. Chris, how about you? Any thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I mean, I did not knowing anybody's personal situation or anything like that. I mean, I would kind of advocate, kind of in line with Courtney, like, don't get a degree just because that's the best option right now and there's not others, unless you have real kind of practical use for that, and that's going to help advance you to where you want to go. To borrow some lingo from my industry, it's all about return on investment. So if you're going to spend the dollars out there, look at the careers of where you're going to land on the other side and do the math. It's a quick equation. What I will also advocate for is where I've seen the most acceleration in my career and how I've developed as a professional person is by learning on the job. And that is not something that can be replicated in a classroom, although business schools try to do a good job with it and they charge you, $100,000 a year to do that. I haven't had to take out a loan once to get that education. In fact, people have paid me to get that education. So I'm a big advocate for, getting in there and learning by doing. But I certainly understand and appreciate that if a degree makes you more competitive, then it's the right move to make.
Yeah, and I went to law school after graduation. It's a 3-year program. It's certainly not something I would recommend just doing to fill your time because it's a challenge mentally and academically and probably emotionally too, but I don't want to relive my experience for all of y'all live. Graduate schools are great options for this period of time, but to Chris's point, you certainly have to balance the fact that you're probably taking out loans to do it. And so you want to make sure that you're doing something that's worthwhile to the career you want to eventually have, and not just taking on financial debt or paying for it out of pocket, even if you're not taking out loans, certainly any of us can chat afterwards. Furman's going to share our email addresses with all of you. So if anyone has specific questions, for any of us about grad school or programs, we'd be happy to answer those. Moving on to the next question. How do you navigate finding an exploratory style internship that is paid? So I guess what this question is asking is how do you maybe find those opportunities if they're not readily available, or how do you maybe, figure out a way to create one for yourself in a market? Drew, I'll kind of start with you since, you're in a less traditional, field. What are your thoughts on sort of a paid internship and how you might be able to find that?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of, it's similar kind of strategy to finding a regular job. I mean, you would hope that there, are a little bit simpler entry points, and that's kind of how it worked out for me. And like, just kind of working through connections, that I made at Furman, Ross McLean in the art department, and then a couple folks over in marketing and public relations. The internship that I got in Atlanta right out of school was through a direct connection in that office. So it was kind of like the type of thing that I'm not even sure if they normally even had interns at that company, but it was like, there was kind of like the opportunity, and I had someone at Furman to vouch for me. And I know like in my industry, if you can demonstrate some kind of like, baseline, skills and can prove that you can like jump in and get to work right away, you can prove that you can contribute to that team, on a base level. But then if you can demonstrate that you have, creative thinking skills, then that's going to like, push you over the edge. That's like really that's a really vague answer, I think, to that question. But yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of tapping into those networks and the people that you've met so far at Furman. I think really, I mean, it's kind of the same approach to finding a job. But definitely the paid thing is important. It's like if you're doing real work, you should be paid. Yeah, I don't know how helpful that is, and I'm happy to like chat individually too with whoever asked that question about some more specific approaches.
Yeah. Courtney, what are your thoughts on, potentially finding an internship that's paid or testing out different internships? Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think similar to what Chris said earlier, like you have to connect with a lot of people. You have to talk to a lot of people. So I think the more connections you can make, the more discussions and conversations you can have, you'll eventually find someone that'll say, oh, well, I know somebody that works at so-and-so, and they're probably looking for something like that because, a recent grad is really cheap labor. So really cheap skilled labor. So, even if it's just something basic, like my first internship, we made their filing system digital, which sounds fancy, and it wrote it up fancy on my resume and on LinkedIn, but all we did was scan stuff in and label it, put it in folders on their hard drive. So it was just, but that was a foot in the door. And then my next summer I worked at IBM and did an investment banking internship. And I did that my entire senior year as well. So you just never know where things are going to lead. And once you have that first foot in the door with an opportunity, that just opens more doors for more things.
Those skills too, like that, sorry to hijack.
No, that's fine.
Those skills, like doing that grunt work too, just like makes you like, I don't know, like that gives you so much kind of
street cred.
Yeah, street cred, and it makes you, it makes you work faster and more efficient. Like what goes into it. The labor,
right.
An appreciation of the labor that goes into the work, and like,
and it shows people you're willing to do whatever is needed. And the most valuable quality of a new employee is willing to help out however it's needed. Sometimes that's getting coffee. Sometimes that's making copies. And that you're not learning from that except how to be a team player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are great points. Chris, what are your thoughts on that question?
No, I think, both Drew and Courtney have hit the nail on the head there. I mean, honestly, I don't have a lot of experience with that just because on the internship side, all of our internships are paid in my industry due to kind of regulatory reasons. So it's not necessarily something I see, but, I think the themes have been something we've all been hitting on throughout the night, right? It's like, identify a clear image for yourself or voice for, the way you tell your story, be consistent in your outreach, but also be thoughtful in your outreach and do a lot of it. You're going to be talking to a lot of people. You're going to get rejected from a lot of people, and it's going to happen. But I think those are kind of the three things that have been the constant theme that, Drew, Courtney, and I have all hit on this evening that I think I would take away from this.
Yeah. Okay, Drew, there's a specific question for you, but I'm going to have Melanie or Lauren put you in touch with Jackie by email. Jackie, we'll get to your question offline. One of the next questions is, how do you find the motivation to apply for jobs or schools when, the world's falling apart around you? And I think, honestly, we can all somewhat relate to this right now. Even though we're working, certainly all of our jobs have been impacted, by this pandemic. So how do you self-motivate, whether it's job search or just going to work or, putting one foot in front of the other? you know, Chris, you've obviously been physically relocated because of this pandemic. Do you have any suggestions for, you know, people who are looking for the daily maybe minute by minute motivation to kind of keep moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, my personal motivation is gonna be a lot different than if I were, you know, a 22-year-old just graduating college. I mean, I have a 2-year-old daughter, and so, you know, I'm with her right now, and I'm kind of single parenting it. So for me, it's getting up and, you know, making sure she's taken care of in the morning and that she's good to go, and then I can, you know, plug in and do the desk. Listen, I love my job. I don't know about Courtney and Drew. It sounds like they both love their jobs. I mean, that is a lot of motivation to get up and do really cool stuff every day. You know, I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. I go to bed, I look at my phone, my planner is, you know, empty. And by the time I wake up, I've got conference calls around the world on my phone. And so for me, it's exciting. I think the genuine excitement of it, I think what motivated me when it was 2009 to look for a job was the fear of my father yelling at me saying, "You're not coming home, you need to get a job."
Me too.
So that's a powerful motivator for a lot of us. But in reality, I think ultimately what really motivated me was a sense of pride in self and wanting to be able to stand on my own 2 feet and get away from underneath of mom and dad, so to speak. Although our parents would never let us struggle, it was really more about just wanting to be able to say, hey, I can financially support myself. I've, you know, gone and gotten a job. It's why I worked 5 jobs in an 18-month period before I worked for Bank of America. I just did what it took to support myself because that was my mentality. And it's something I'm very proud of to this day, even though, you know, it seemed like I was bouncing around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Courtney, how about you? What suggestions do you have for people looking for motivation?
Similar to Chris, like I just kept my eye on the prize. Like I knew where I wanted to end up and I was just going to do whatever it took to get there. So if it meant, you know, for me backtracking to an old job or, you know, I had a retail job my senior year as well. And so, I mean, people weren't shopping, but these people, my coworkers at the retail store still had their jobs. So, you know, it was kind of like, okay, well, what are my other options and how do I stay employed and how do I keep bringing, you know, some sort of paycheck home to get me through this, to get to where I need to be at the end of the day, or, you know, where I want to be in 5, 10, 15 years. Now, that's definitely changed. I mean, I pursued public accounting. I was in there for 8 years and got out because I didn't love my job every day. But now I spend most of my days talking to either coworkers or people out in the job market who are looking for jobs. And sometimes that's kind of depressing. Like right now, there's a lot of people looking for jobs and not a lot of jobs to be had. But I found that talking to people has been also very motivating because everyone has their own road to hoe and they're all, you know, we're all getting through this together. So it's just kind of talking through and talking to other people. Well, you know, maybe reach out to even your classmates, like, hey, how are you doing? How are you getting through this? Or maybe it's friends from high school that are, you know, graduated from a different part of the country or a different city. You know, what are you doing to get through this? And just brainstorming together. You know, more 2 heads are better than one. So I think it's just, you know, motivating each other, keeping your eye on where you want to be down the road. And figuring out how to navigate that, even if it's different from what you originally planned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are great suggestions. Drew, what about you?
Yeah, so I think the unique thing about this situation too is like, I think we have, even when you're in kind of the daily grind of applying for jobs and everything, like what this crisis is kind of exposing is all of these like systemic issues that have been with us for a long time. So it's like we like coming out with these like liberal arts skills, critical thinking skills, like we can like make an impact, you know, in all of our unique fields. You know, what that looks different for each of the 4 of us on the screen right now. It'll look different for each of y'all, but like, this is kind of an opportunity to kind of like rethink and rebuild, kind of like our dreams for what the world can be. It sounds so hokey, but it's true. Like a lot of things are broken and like that's being exposed. So it's like we, you know, we have the skills and knowledge to bring to kind of, you know, to fix things and make them how we want them to be. Again, that looks completely different in all different fields, but yeah, like that's, you know, we're given the training and knowledge to do things kind of in a big way, you know?
Yeah. I always think back on I was a straight A student in high school, and when I went to Furman, I thought it was going to be pre-med, probably like 80% of the Furman students, I guess. And I took a biology class my freshman year, and I truly worked really hard. Like, I read every night and thought I was doing great. And every single test, I got like a C or a C minus. And at the end of the semester, I was like, you know, my motivation to work hard in that class was just gone, because I had invested every single drop of energy into trying to do well in that class, and it just didn't work. And, you know, at the time I was like, you know what, maybe pre-med's clearly not for me. Like, I'm working so hard and it's just not working out. And I had that exact same experience my first semester of law school. I took a criminal law class, which I don't practice in now, and thought it was kind of interesting, but no matter how hard I worked at it, I just didn't do well in the class. And I think finding motivation in that situation is similar to kind of the job search now. Everyone's looking for a job. Everyone's trying to figure out what, you know, where things are going to go from here, what the next week is going to look like, next 6 months, next 2 years. And, you know, I think you just have to be confident. And I know that's easier said than done, but you know, all of you who are graduating from Furman have a really good foundation, a really strong network. You're more well-rounded than you think you are. And I think it's just, you know, to Drew and Courtney and Chris's point, surrounding yourself with people who are going through the same thing makes it feel like you're less out there in the world floating around on your own. But I think you just have to remind yourself of all the skills and talents and experiences that you have, and you know, continue just putting one step in front of the other. But I know, like I said, I know that's easier said than done, and it's certainly, you know, difficult for everyone. So I'd say just hang in there. I know it's 8 o'clock, but we have one more question. So for those participants who had kind of allocated an hour, need to go, completely understand. I think Furman's going to make our email addresses available. So if you have any questions, you can follow up. Just real quickly, the last question for our panel is kind of cold calling and cold emailing versus leveraging connections. What are y'all's quick thoughts on, you know, which is a more valuable use of time, cold calling and emailing, or really trying to pull on strings that, you know, you might already have available? Drew, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination. Like, I mentioned the kind of like portfolio review type of thing. I think those can be a little bit more fruitful if it comes through a connection that you already have. But I also think in, you know, like during this pandemic or whatever, I've seen personally, like, people reach out and do cold calls and have Zoom meetings with like design idols. So I think don't be afraid. I do think also, like, the worst thing that can happen is you don't hear anything, you know. Probably 99% of the time you're not going to hear, 99% of the time you're either not going to hear something or it's not going to turn into a job, but you might be able to talk to someone and have a great conversation. So I think it's worth it.
Yeah. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, it's certainly worth it. And I'm just jumping between screens here. In the chat, we actually had a question similar about outreach and connecting with people who are passionate about what they do. And I think, listen, cold calling someone is incredibly difficult, but when done right and done properly, incredibly effective and powerful. And if you do your research and you have a good story to tell, where you know, get that email just perfect into something that somebody can read in, you know, really short, you know, 3 or 4 sentences, and they get on the phone with you and you can tell that story, it has a big impact. And so 100% do cold calling outreach, but, you know, don't be afraid to leverage the network as well, because leveraging the network is going to actually put you in the direction of where, you know, I know somebody here, but I haven't talked to them in 5 years. That's still a cold call, right? You're gonna get a name and an email, but they haven't been keeping up. You're going to be that point of connection. And so there's many instances that I have in my experience where it's just sending an email. And I was kind of trying to go through some files here and pull up the stats for you, but I'll kind of just roughly estimate it for you. For me to get one job offer out of school at Bank of America, first job, I emailed 77 finance and banking professionals in Atlanta. I spoke to probably 20 of them, actual, like, just phone calls, not even in person. Probably saw like 4 of them in person and had one person offer me a job. So those are the numbers that are probably pretty reality for a lot of people. So, things we've talked about, don't get scared of rejection. Rejection's your friend. You're only going to get better by that. And listen, sending a cold email, to Drew's point, it doesn't hurt. What's the worst that happens? He doesn't reply. So fire away.
Courtney, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I personally don't have a lot of experience with cold calling, and it scares me a lot. But to Chris and Drew's points, yeah, I totally agree. It's very effective when done correctly. I think making use of the connections is also, like, don't dismiss that, and I think you can, a connection could be something as simple as, okay, you see a job online for Home Depot, and then you see someone in the alumni directory that works at Home Depot, and you just reach out to them on LinkedIn, or you have their email through the alumni directory and say, hey, I'm a student, I just graduated, whatever your situation is, I'd love to connect and chat and learn more about your job at Home Depot. Maybe mention that you saw the job posting on the computer and would love some help. And probably because you have that Furman connection, they're going to help you out. And that's less scary than a complete cold call, because you have the Furman connection that you can leverage. So it's somewhere between a cold call and a connection, but it'll also help. They might not be the hiring manager, but they don't have to be. They know who to send it to, or they can help figure out who to send it to, because everybody knows who's hiring in the HR department or who that job would report to. That's something you can figure out pretty easily. So I think leveraging the connections as much as possible, even though it might not look like a direct connection, or, maybe you're, like, let's say you're connected to me on LinkedIn and you see that I'm connected to somebody that works at a company that you want to work for. Well, feel free to reach out to me and say, or not me, but anybody in that situation, and say, hey, I saw this, that you're connected to so-and-so. Would you mind making an introduction? And that's another way to make a connection that maybe wouldn't be a direct connection that you already have, but that you could pretty easily make happen.
Yeah, and I agree. Just to add to that, I think for those of you, I think making a cold call or sending a cold email is intimidating no matter what, because you don't know what kind of response you're going to get, if any. So I'd say for those of you who think there's this, like, perfect job opportunity out there for you, but it's a really cold call to make. Practice with your network first. People in a similar profession, or maybe used to work for that company, or maybe to Courtney's point, are third or fourth connections away from whoever you're going to reach out to, and kind of practice with them before you make that really important cold call or send that cold email. That way it can be as personalized and informative and genuine as possible. If you're it's perfectly fine to send a whole bunch of, cold emails or make cold phone calls, if they're for jobs that you maybe aren't as passionate about. But if there's that one kind of perfect opportunity for you, I'd say lay the groundwork as much as you possibly can. Even if it's sending, a cover letter, a draft of your email or whatever to a professor or a Furman alumni or a friend of your parents or whoever it may be, just to kind of get some feedback so that, you can ensure that your cold call or email is going to, be as taken as seriously as it possibly can be. So anyway,
Lindy, real quick, can I just add to that? And the one thing I would say is, if you have identified that job and you found, okay, this is the person who runs that team or is the manager, and this is the job that I have to have because I'm the perfect fit for it and the right candidate, you don't necessarily have to go to them and say, this is a job off the bat. You can go to them and say, really would like to learn more about your firm XYZ. I'd like to learn more about your role, how you progressed. People love to talk about themselves. You've listened to 4 talking heads today talk about themselves. Get the conversation about them, about how they've progressed in their career, and learn about them. Eventually, you'll find something that they're talking about that's unique about what you want to do with your experience. And that's how you can open it to, hey, you talked about, credit training at banking being really important. How would you go about recommending getting that experience, right? Where would I look for that type of role, right? All of a sudden now you went from a conversation learning about somebody to a conversation about a potential job opportunity. Oh, and by the way, they're probably hiring for that too, because they're a manager that runs that group because you've identified them. So if you craft your message and your story correctly, and you know the levers to pull, and it's only going to come with conversations and talking to people, you can get it right.
Yeah, I think that's great. Well, before I throw it back to Lauren, I just want to ask if anyone has any, kind of final advice or last thoughts or, imparting wisdom that you want to leave with our participants. Drew, I'll start with you.
I'll just say, I think everyone who's watched tonight is already demonstrating like a lot of eagerness, to get out there. And yeah, I think everything that everyone said is really valuable. I think it's hard to hear, but be patient, be persistent, and just keep in touch with as many people as you can, and just, lift each other up. All of your classmates are going through the same thing. So just remember who your community is.
Thank you, Drew. Courtney?
Yeah, I just want to say congratulations to all the recent graduates. It's a strange year, but definitely an exciting time for you nonetheless. No matter what's going on, you've accomplished 4 years or however long it took you to graduate to Furman. So, pat yourselves on the back for that and just keep pushing along, and take advantage of us. I mean, we obviously took an hour out of our Tuesday evening to chat with you, which means we're probably willing to chat further with anybody who needs some help and advice. So, take advantage of that. Take advantage of, your other Furman resources, and let us know how we can help you.
Thanks, Courtney. Chris?
Thanks, Lindy. For me, the biggest takeaway that I think I want you to leave you guys with is there's no right way and there's no wrong way to do this. I mean, you've heard 4 different stories about how people have gone about it. Every story has its, own unique nuance to it. I mean, I think at the end of the day, if anything, I've seen, Furman students are very resilient. And I think our education and the way that Furman promotes kind of the engaged learning sets itself up really well. Just find that way to communicate your personal story. And I think everyone will have, bright futures. This recession is not going to last, long like it did in 1928, and it won't last as long as it did in 08. 08 was 18 months. This probably will snap back by the end of the year, and most of the job market being impacted is outside of areas where you guys are looking, but nonetheless it is having ripple effects through the broader economy. And so that's kind of me putting on my banker hat for a second, but be resilient, because that's what Furman students are.
Yeah. Well, Courtney, Drew, and Chris, thank you so much. It was great seeing all of you and chatting with you. I hope our participants got a lot out of this. I'll just say that, on behalf of all of us in the Furman alumni community, welcome to being a Furman alumni. It's you're out in the real world now, and it's a different experience, but we really do support each other and have each other's back. And I'll just encourage any of you to reach out to Furman alumni, in your geographic area, or within your major, or contacts that your professors have in your department. And the other sort of resource I'll throw out there is Furman has a young alumni council. It is graduates within the last 15 years from Furman. And you can contact the alumni office for, contacts on the Young Alumni Council. I've served on that council for the past, 5 years now. And we met as a group probably about a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, and really focused on how young alumni can support recent graduates and students. And so I know that there's a large group of young alumni out there who want to help you. And even if that's just proofreading your resume or doing a mock interview or, you know, kind of having these discussions one-on-one, there are people out there who want to support you, and that you should feel comfortable doing that with, you know, without feeling intimidated or nervous. So please take advantage of those resources. All four of us are gonna, I think on the next screen when we pass it back to Lauren, we'll give you our email addresses. So please reach out to us. We thank you so much for your time. And Lauren, with that, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thanks, Lindy. Thanks so much for moderating tonight's panel, and a big thanks to all of our alumni panelists as well. I always tell our students that we've got the best alums at Furman University, and we're just so grateful for all of you taking the time to join us tonight. So thank you very much. Y'all will see on the screen that all of our panelists have shared their contact information. So if you all have any additional questions or just want to connect, you have their contact information here. I also want to share that we hope to continue to do additional programs, alumni panels. So we'd love to hear from our attendees what types of programs you'd be interested in. We have one last poll question that we'll share with you. Let's see. So if you all would just take a few minutes just to share with us what topics you'd be interested in hearing about in the future. And if you have additional ideas, you could either email the careerengagement.furman@furman.edu, or you can also send us your suggestions through the chat function. Great. All right, great. Thank you. That's helpful. And then lastly, those of you that are in the class of 2020 that are just graduated, I want to remind you that we've just launched the Alumni Connections Mentoring Program. So if you are interested in signing up for that, you can contact Melanie Armstrong. You can see her email address there, and you will be connected with an alumni mentor to help you with your transition post-graduation. And then lastly, if you have any questions or need additional advising with your resume or your job search strategies, the Malone Center for Career Engagement, we're going to be around all summer, so feel free to reach out. We're happy to connect with you. So once again, a big thanks to our panelists. We're so grateful for your time, and I hope everyone has a great night.
Thanks so much. Good to see y'all.
Thanks. Good night.
Bye.